in just a few days from now, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, money making Mitch, Mr. Love, I don't know. That dude, you know who I'm talking about. He will be releasing his next solo effort, Off the Grid, which he claims will be the project that finally saves R&B. If I hear one auto-tuned note on that thing, I'm calling Suge Knight. Anyway, regardless of that project, in celebration of everything that Bad Boy has done, we are going to show my man Puff some love today. Because despite my skepticism, we got to keep it real. For almost 30 years, Bad Boy Records has defined, and especially in that sweet spot of 1994 to 2001, they defined music, both hip hop and R&B. He helped reshape a sound, and we got to give him credit for that. So many classic albums in that era, so many beloved songs, videos, and so much more. So today, that's what we're going to do, because we give flowers here. We are going to go back and revisit and celebrate the 20 best albums of Bad Boy Records run. Come through. What up, players? Thank you for joining me again for another edition of the Soul and Stereo Sessions on YouTube. And you heard me earlier. We're going to talk about Bad Boy Records today and shout out, celebrate the 20 best albums of this historic label. Man, and there's some dope ones there for sure. Now, before we get going though, you know what we got to do. You got to help your boy out with a little bit of housekeeping. Take a moment and hit the like on this video. Just takes a second and it's free, y'all. You ain't gotta pay nothing. Just hit the like. Hit like, and if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, because the more subscribers we get, the bigger the tribe we build, the more videos I'll be able to come out with, the more YouTube will give us that love and show us, and we can have more combos down in the comment section. And of course, once it's done, make sure you share it as well, because you know it's dope. So just get some combo going around this good stuff. So today, speaking of good stuff, we are talking about Bad Boy in 1994, going all the way to 2003. Now, before we get started though, one caveat. So, Bad Boy has a lot of albums, and because of its fame and reach, there are a lot of albums that has a lot of history behind it, and it's very celebrated. Some of those albums, though, might not hold up as well as you might remember when those nostalgia goggles were taken off. But it's all good, because what we're going to do today is celebrate albums, not just the most popular albums of their era, but in my opinion, the best albums of their era. So you might see some that you haven't seen in a long time. There'll be some that you might not even know were Bad Boy albums. But that's what we're here to do, to put y'all on. One other caveat though, one thing to keep in mind so y'all won't be screaming in the comments and I'll have to embarrass you. This list is albums that were specifically under the Bad Boy Records banner. There are lots of artists who were affiliated with Bad Boy who did not have albums under that banner. So this will not be any Lil Kim albums. You won't see any Jodeci albums. You won't see any Mary J albums. Even though the New Edition album that came out around 1996 that had Puff's involvement, that one won't be here either. Sorry, y'all. They were not Bad Boy Records albums. That was just Bad Boy influence. But the later album might be up for grabs. Might. We'll have to look and see if that makes it. Only official Bad Boy albums will be on this list, y'all. So, all right, let's get to it. Take that. We can't stop. Won't stop, you know, all that Puff stuff. Coming in at number 20 is the self-titled debut of Sean Poe. Poor Sean. I feel like Sean didn't get the the love and admiration that he deserved, his career was just derailed. First, he came on the scene. People were mad because he sounded like my guy, Biggie. And I didn't really get it. And I was a big Biggie stan, as you can tell by the looming photo over my shoulder. He sounds sort of like Biggie, but I didn't feel like he was trying to be Biggie. You know how you hear someone and you see him down the street and you think it's your boy because of the way their voice sounds? It's just like how he sounds. It's not like you, oh my gosh, you're trying to be like Paul. Like, no, he just happens to sound like your dude. I never thought that he was coming from big spot and intentionally trying to sound like him. He just had that same gruff voice and delivery. And then, of course, we know how his career got sidetracked immediately after it happened with the issue with Puff and the case and him being locked up for years and taking the rap, and what a mess. Poor guy's in a better place now. But in 2000, I thought this album was very promising. Bad Boy was definitely in this period of shifting at the time, and they were trying to find themselves after losing so many of their big acts, and their more established acts were starting to be cycled out, so we had needed new blood. I thought Shine was going to be one who's going to take Bad Boy to that next level because he was just so gruff and aggressive and anti-signing suit. Everything that Bad Boy was representing, he was kind of the opposite. He was kind of like their DMX. He was just the gruff street dude. And this album, although it did have a few Bad Boy isms that didn't really fit, when it was just Shine doing Shine things, I thought it was a really promising debut that should have gotten a little bit more love. Coming in at number 19, the Girls of Total, Kima Keisha Pam with Kima Keisha Pam. I didn't think too hard about that album title. This album really isn't that much of a departure from their previous album, which was a little bit more well remembered, and probably why this one isn't remembered as much, because it really seems like a part 2 to that. Didn't reach the heights of the first one, but it's pretty solid on its own. I really liked the singles. I thought both the singles were excellent, and there were some good album cuts as well. Press Rewind and what was the song with Mace? I can't think of it. Y'all can go back and look. D Roth will tell you. Yeah, that one. So beyond that, I thought the album had lots of potential and a few holes here and there. Some of the later tracks were just okay. But overall, this was a fun project at a time where Bad Boy really wasn't missing. Everything was a hit at the time. This was the last album, surprisingly, that we saw of Total. We only got 2 albums from them, which seems kind of weird when so many of the other artists were so prolific. So I do wish we got more from the girls. I was a big fan, but at least they left us with a good one. Coming in at number 18 is Day 26. I'll keep it real with y'all. I kind of missed the Day 26 hysteria around 2008, and for a couple reasons. Number one, by the time they were doing Making the Band, they were on Making the Band 38. I had checked out of Making the Band by then, so I really wasn't keeping up with the latest. Also, 2008 was that start of the era of R&B where I was starting to like, I don't know how I like this. Things were just starting to shift in a way that I was not really feeling. And boy, were my spidey senses right to tingle, because the next decade was rough and we still haven't recovered. But to Day 26's credit, they didn't fall in those traps. I heard this album years and years later, and it is a very solid and promising release. It's very much a throwback of what Bad Boy was known for, taking those soulful brothers that could just sing and throwing in a few hip-hop elements that don't overpower it. Thank you, they didn't turn into rappers like they would do today. It's not 4 dudes rapping, but they are dudes who are actually taking R&B and just have a little bit of edge to it, and that makes for a strong project. If this album came out in a different era, I think it would be better received. And I understand for some generations of fans, Day 26 is like that's their 112. That's their Drew Hill. That's their Jagged Edge. And again, it's another artist, a group of artists that just didn't hang around that long for several reasons. Not only due to group dynamics, but just R&B just falling to pieces in the following years. I wish we got more from them. Their follow-up project was pretty decent too. Not quite as good as this one, but pretty decent. But this was a promising debut that should have been signs for much bigger things to come. Hope we still get some stuff from them. in at number 17 is Dep, Child of the Ghetto. Some of y'all probably just forgot about this album totally. And I guess I understand why, because this is another album that came on kind of the tail end of the peak Bad Boy era in 2000, 2001. I really liked Dep at the time. He was an artist that people kind of turned their noses up at due to his off-kilter delivery. But if you listen to him now, he actually was a trailblazer. He sounds like half the dudes on the radio with that stilted flow that's a little jarring at first. But the reason why Dep was dope to me is that he had a story to tell. A lot of these songs on this album were not traditionally, the flow and structure was not as traditional as you would expect from hip hop at the time. But he was very blatant about talking about the hardship of his life and how he grew up. And I love storytelling, as y'all know, in hip hop. I love when there's real actual stakes behind it and it's just not random words thrown everywhere like somebody dropped a box of alphabets on the floor. But he actually has focus and delivery, and there's so much potential here. And I'm saying that for a lot of these latter albums. Potential is the name, because he could have been I feel like a decent contributor, especially as we got closer to the 2010s. His sound would have definitely resonated by then. That was a little bit long. He could have used a little bit of trimming, but it is absolutely a forgotten gem in the Bad Boy Chronicle. All right, coming in at number 16 is Craig Mack, Project Funk the World. Poor Craig Mack is another artist that got lost in the shuffle. He came out right after Biggie's debut, and because Biggie's debut was, Biggie, it was hard to follow that act. But this album was really solid in itself. He kind of quickly got lost to history to when you're following the GOAT. It's hard to come after him a couple months later with your own project, but a project that in fact was very solid. Y'all know him from the Flavor in the Ear remix, but there's way more to it. I love Craig Mack's delivery. It was so distinct. When you heard Craig Mack on the track, you knew it was Craig Mack. And that's something that we miss today when everybody sounds like the same asleep android. It's good to hear an artist that has a distinct flow, tone, and delivery. And Craig Mack did that all throughout this project. We know Flavor in Your Ear. We know the remix. But there were many other gems in this project as well. So go back and check it out. And RIP to Craig Mack. We lost him not too long ago. And I don't feel like we ever gave him the love that he deserved. So let's do that now. Coming in at 15 is the debut album from Total. I think that we need to recognize Total and give them a little bit more love for setting the template for what the Bad Boy sound would be. Bad Boy sound was, of course, we know that it was a brainchild of Puff, who was able to create that hip-hop soul sound that he gifted to Mary J. Blige and Jodeci over at Uptown. But this album is really that to the next level. Just these incredible samples that just flip old tracks in an aggressive and cool way. You got the rappers featured on the album doing it big. Biggie just destroying his verse. And then the girls just wrapping everything up with their vocals and their presence and their attitude. They had like all the leather. They were rocking the Matrix look before the Matrix. Way ahead of their time. This album, of course, we know the singles. And as for many of the projects, as I'm saying on this list, have great album cuts as well. When Boy Meets Girl, was that ever a single? Because it sure should have been. That needed a video. So we love Total. And this is the album, of course, that gets most of the love and admiration, as it should. Their second project is good, but this one was the one. Coming in at number 14, my boy Black Rob, Life Story. Another artist we lost way too soon. R.I.P. to Black Rob. And his hit single, Whoa, he makes a point of saying that he threw all the bad boy on his back like, whoa. That's true. Because by the time this album came out, there was no Biggie. There was no Mace. Puff was kind of doing half artist, half producer. He was all over the place. Bad Boy needed like a hip hop artist to be the flagship. And Black Rob was being set up to be that guy. This album is very good, y'all. Another album that people miss, mainly due to, in my opinion, the Rough Rider scene taking over, DMX just obliterating everybody, Jay-Z rising up, Nas was still around, and you had, of course, Master P doing his thing. There was so much competition in the late 90s, and I think people just were getting misdirected from Bad Boy after their mid-90s dominance. So with Biggie gone, there was this void. Black Rob stepped in with a very, very powerful, emotional record that was, I think it still holds up today. I listened to it not long ago, and I think it still holds strong today. Another one of these albums on the later part of this list that's quite underrated in my eyes, and I think is one that you should check out if you've missed it. Coming in at number 13 is Faith Evans' Keep the Faith. Back in 98, I'll be real, I was not loving this album. I thought it was alright because, as we'll get to very, very, very soon, is this album came off the heels of an incredible debut. And there was no way that she could just, actually, there's a song on this album called No Way, and it's dope. But more than that later. There was no way that she could reach that bar. The bar's just too high. She couldn't reach it. So this album also came out right on the heels of her losing our boy, Notorious B.I.G. He had just passed. So there was a lot going on in her life. She was pregnant. She was not, in my opinion, able to overshadow or reach the level of that debut. That one still overshadowed this project to me a bit. But that does not mean 2003 Ed can tell old 98 Ed. That does not mean this project was bad. Far from it. This album came out today. It'd be R&B album of the year. Easily. This project is still very strong, and it's strong because of those album cuts. The singles were just alright to me, but the album cuts, that No Way song that I just mentioned, and a few others are the ones that are the glue to keep this project together. Faith, of course, her vocals are still stirring as always. An incredible project. She would do it better later, and she did it better before, but we give props for what she gave us here. It was a good record. Old 2003 Grouchy Ed, I can admit that. Coming in at number 12 is old Puff Daddy himself, this time with the family, on No Way Out. This album is just, I told it on the Soul and Stereo website not too long ago, the equivalent of a summer blockbuster. You got A-list guest features all over the place. This top tier bombastic production. Y'all remember the videos that were like mini movies that cost millions of dollars? It's crazy that these videos were so extensive, and now you just got people filming videos on their iPhones, like sitting on the back of their cars, waving guns at the camera. What a time. Anyway, this album was just, it exceeded my expectations because, as we all know, Puff is no Rakim. So he wisely steps back and let all his guests, all the Bad Boy family, everybody come in and just take over from him. And they did an incredible job. And again, this is the first project after the passing of Notorious B.I.G. So it was a lot of meaning and emotion behind that. And Puff really talks about his grappling with mortality, really. He's just really doubtful of everything, despite the success he's had. There's this looming specter of death. That really is a theme over the album as well. So even though it's old, flashy, and girls, and shiny suits, and women, and cars, there's also this theme of paranoia that runs through it. And I don't think it gets enough credit for having something to say as well. This album is a very, very, very good, way better than you expect. And of course, by far, Puffy's best solo release. Until we get this Off the Grid album that's gonna save R&B. Yay! Coming in at number 11, yes, you saw that right, is Janelle Monae's Dirty Computer. Many of you do not know this, but Janelle Monae is a Bad Boy Records artist. And let me let you in on a little secret. This list was originally going to be a top 10 Bad Boy list. I extended it to 20 because Janelle broke the list. As we will see, she has several albums on this list. And because she has so many albums on this list, that means some albums that are much more related and recognized as bad boy releases were kind of shoved to the back. And I didn't want y'all yelling at me, so I was like, let's make this list a little bit longer so y'all won't be yelling. But why is Janelle a bad boy artist, you say? Because I'm sure you're like, that's not true. Let me run to Wikipedia. Go run to Wikipedia so you can look crazy. But the point is, yes, she is a bad boy artist and has been throughout her career. I recently saw an interview with Puff where she said that she came to Bad Boy at the right time in his career because he was at a level where he was mature enough to say, you know what, she's doing stuff that I ain't really don't know what she's doing. So I'm going to let her do her and have her creative freedom. I'm not going to be like the previous Puff and change it and make it what I want. She needs this to be her project. And as we have seen in the albums that have come out since her debut, everything has been very distinct and unique to its credit and benefit of her. So let's talk about this album real quick, because this album is absolutely distinct into her. Everybody talks today about how like, oh, Janelle, she's just showing her nipples and she's just so sexual. What's going on? This came out of nowhere. It didn't come out of nowhere. You didn't see this album. This is the album where Janelle was really starting to embrace her sexuality. She was dressed up like a dancing vagina on one of these videos. Go back and check it out. I'm not making it up. The point is, this album is part of what she is, and while it steps away from her kind of Cindy Mayweather Metropolis themes that we'll get to later, this is an album that's more about finding woman in herself. Who is Janelle Monae? This is what this album is exploring. Going back from her struggles as a child to the woman that she is today. She's finding herself through her music, through this digital age, and it's just so well done. When it comes to creativity, Janelle is one of the best we have right now, and I love the creativity showcased on this Bad Boy Records album. Who knew? We're at the top 10, and coming in at number 10 is 112's Part 3, their third album. I've talked several times before across Soul and Stereo, the Soul and Stereo universe, so to speak, that I marvel at the fact that 112 were able to put out 3 albums of consistent quality back to back to back. This is the lesser of the trilogy, but the lesser of the trilogy is still one of the best albums of its era. An incredible body of work. What makes it so good? What makes all the R&B albums from Bad Boys good? The production and the writing and the diversity. You get a song that's tailor-made for the clubs. You get a song that's tailor-made for the bedrooms. You got a song that's going to jerk the tears out of you because they are able to give different aspects of the human emotional spectrum and to add the R&B element, to sprinkle the hip-hop element. And they can do it in such poise, and the writing is incredible. I love everything about peak era 112, and I absolutely love this album. Again, I wouldn't say that I would put it up there for the previous two. The previous two just hit another level of excellence. This one has a little bit of filler that I would chop out. I think it got a little tiny loss along the way. No matter, still a great record, and one that 112 can absolutely be proud of. Coming in at number 9, we're back at Janelle with the Electric Lady. So in this album, she was trying to dodge that sophomore jinx. The sophomore jinx that comes and knocks out so many artists. But as you'll see from this list, sophomore jinx ain't messing with these bad boy artists. They just take L's every time. This is the opportunity for Janelle to show that her debut wasn't a fluke. And she proved that very well. The 70s, the 80s, all of these sounds, especially her influence from Prince, are very, very prominent here. And again, just like the album before and after, this is a celebration of Janelle, the woman, finding herself as a woman, speaking for women. And I love that she's able to use her music as a platform for that. And of course, the creativity is just, whew, Lord. She just, every song hits. Every song hits. In the long term, I feel like that some argue between this and the debut as her best. I think it's a slight step down, the slightest of steps, as we'll talk about very soon. But it just doesn't have the creativity attached to it that the debut did. But for what it is one of the best albums of the 2010s. I've talked about it before. And one of the best of Bad Boys era. And that's some rarefied air right there. Coming in at number 8, yes, we going back to back. Janelle Monae, the Archandroid, her debut album. I love that this album took some of y'all so by surprise. When this album came out, there's so many of the R&B faithful, so many of you R&B experts out there. I see y'all. They just didn't know what to do with this album. You're just like, well, what is she talking about? Is she talking about being in space? Call Afrofuturism, player. Get on it. This is an album that's not, it goes beyond the typical tropes of, oh, I'm in love, or I hate you, oh, I want to have sex with you, even though all of that is there, but it's under the guise of this world that she's created called Metropolis, from this artist, this person that she's created, actually more like a robot, Sydney Mayweather, this android lady, and how she is looking for unrequited love, and she's a robot, and she's on the run, and the people trying to get her. It's absolutely a movie. And knowing the Janelle Monae that we know today, the movie star, the creative mind, knowing it now, it doesn't seem that odd. But at the time, it just seemed like a weird left turn that took people off guard. But look beyond that and look at what we actually got from the vocal performances, from the writing, from the construction of this album. Don't be intimidated because of a robot player. This album is incredible, exquisitely done. It's home to some of her most recognizable songs. And this was the album to me that really put her on the map as to be a star. In the 2010s, I thought Janelle Monae, that was going to be her decade. She was going to take over. I've been wrong before, and I hate to admit when I'm wrong. I wasn't right, but when we're talking about creativity, I dare you to find another album in the past 10 years that hit like this one did. I love Janelle. Didn't really like the new album too much. Felt like it was a little bit playing to the masses. But when she was at her creative peak, I was in Metropolis with her dancing with the androids. An incredible album and one that's a testament to her career. Coming in at number 7 is Carl Thomas, Emotional. And I'm going to take a second to shout out my college professor, Dr. Koontz. Shout out to Dr. Koontz. And I'll tell you why. In 2000, it's weird as it says because as it sounds, because we love to romanticize that era. This was really the era, if you look back really hard, where songwriting and R&B started to not be as strong as it was. Because hip-hop's influence was starting to take, not nearly as bad as it would get, but it was starting to take hold. And the writing was not as poetic and gripping as it was. It was more a shock value, for lack of a better term. It was more like, in your face, but it wasn't thoughtful, for lack of a better term. And as a young music fan, I really didn't grasp that until I was talking to my professor, who was actually an artist himself and actually a pretty incredible singer. He be killing. And he was just raving about this Carl Thomas album. I had only heard a I Wish song, and I really wasn't a big fan of that song, so I didn't listen to the whole project. And he was telling me, you need to listen to this album. If you're a fan of R&B, songwriting is back, is basically what he was saying. And I caught this album, and boy, was he right. This album, I love it because Bad Boy is known for his hip-hop influences, and that's not a bad thing at all when done well, and it usually is done well on the Bad Boy side of things. But he just kind of took it back. He had the production and the Bad Boy resources, but he went back in the bag. He went to the 60s and 70s and got that songwriting. And that's what makes this album, to me, such an emotional experience. You see what I did there. Carl Thomas' debut is something that, man, he never topped. And it's one of the best R&B albums on Bad Boy's roster. to this day is one of the most celebrated ones, and for good reason. So shout out to my man, Dr. Kuntz, for putting me on this album. I almost missed it because I was like, I don't like I Wish. I wish I got on this album sooner because it's dope. Coming in at number 6, we're back to Faith Evans with Faithfully. I'll never forget. I was watching BT circa 2001, a couple months before this album dropped. And Puff was on BT and he made this bold proclamation that this album was the best album of Faith Evans' career. He couldn't wait for y'all to hear it. He was like, this album is incredible. And I was like, ain't no way. Ain't no way it's better than the debut. I was right. It ain't better than the debut. However, it is one of the best albums on this list, if you can't tell. And it's one of the best albums of its decade. An incredible, incredible album that, again, does what Bad Boy does so well. The strong performances, the strong writing, the creative use of hip-hop samples, it's all there. And Faith has no problem bearing her emotions on these wax. She'll just do it. She'll tell all her business and put it out there. And it's such a strong, strong release that I love. And I love the production of it. I may say the production might even rival her debut. The production might be better than her debut. It's just a well put together release. And I hate that this was the end of Faith's run on Bad Boy, because she went out with such a bang. I wanted another album. I'm often the person who says I don't want artists to make the same album over and over and over again because it quickly gets old. You need to give fans need something new. Artists need something new. They need new creative outputs. They don't need to keep doing the same thing over and over again. But man, I wish we got just some more stuff from this Faith Evans era. I know there's some stuff floating around in those sessions. I like to hear that because she was just on another level at this point. Man, love this album so much. And I wish we got a little bit more before she drifted on to another phase of her career, because at least she went out on Bad Boy with a big old bang. Coming in at number 5 is Biggie, Ready to Die. How can the dude who has Biggie looking over his shoulder put one of the most celebrated hip-hop classics of all time at number 5? I know that's what you're asking yourself, as you're probably doxing me to looking to find my house and burn down my car or whatever. Let me explain why. I will explain because I am the most unbiased reviewer here on these internets, and even I can find things to point out about my GOAT. And to be honest, this is an incredible album until the last few tracks. Then it starts, the castle starts to crumble a little bit for me. I start skipping around once we get on the second half of this album. So that takes it down from that elite 5-star level and knocks it to 4.5 stars. But listen, enough about why this album doesn't work. And let's talk about why it is one of the best albums of its era. Biggie is a master storyteller. He has been compared to the hip-hop Hitchcock for a reason. No one paints pictures like Biggie does. One of the greatest lyricists and storytellers ever to step into the game. And this album is a depiction of a man who's struggling with paranoia. He's struggling with suicidal thoughts, as we see. The end of the album ends with his life ending because he just is trying to find his way. He's trying to be a father. He's trying to find success. But the life he left behind just keeps chasing him and he can't escape it. This album, is so brilliant in the way that it's put together. And of course, he is one of the greatest lyricists of all time. This has some great songs. We know the singles. I do think that some of the remixes are better than the actual songs on the album. That's another thing that steps it down a little bit. But you put those remixes on it, take out a few of the others, this problem will be 5 stars that y'all expect. I will not diss this album as far as what it came to the game, what it brought to the game, what it brought to Biggie's career, what it brought to Bad Boy. This is the album that put Bad Boy on the map for real, and it made Biggie the legend that he is today. I have no problem calling this a classic, just not perfect. You and I can admit that. Coming in at number 4 is 112's debut album. Yes, this album ranks this high because this thing is that flawless to me. When it comes to albums that tell a cohesive sonic story, I point to 112's debut. Because in this playlist era that we're currently stuck in, chained to, locked down in, there's no flow to albums. It's just like a collection of random songs. It's just this, blah, 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 blah. You listen to this 112 album, it sounds like one session. And I don't mean it sounds like the same song over and over again, because that would be bad. But it has the same tone, the same theme. There are peaks and valleys in it, but it all sounds like you're sitting and watching one continuous concert play out before your eyes and ears. 112 is exquisite. I've heard the argument that like, oh, this album is overrated because there's a bunch of Boyz II Men leftovers. Well, seeing that Boyz II Men had just dropped the best album of the 90s, if these are the leftovers of that, that's some good leftovers. That's some good eating. I want to eat from that plate. That's the place you need to eat from. They nailed it. And for them to be Boyz II Men Jr., you want to call it that, cool. But all I know is that from front to back, from Cupid to Only You, to the Only You remix, to the interludes, my God, the interludes, there is not one misstep throughout this record. When it comes to cohesive R&B records, I dare you to find one tighter than this. Coming in at number 3, yep, we running it back again. Another back-to-back one with 112, Room 112. I've talked before about how these 112 boys are just, the first 3 albums, I will go to my grave saying that these albums are incredible. Some of the best R&B of its era. And of the 3, I give Room 112 the slight edge over the debut because the debut is super ballad heavy, admittedly. There's some incredible ballads, every one. But this one just tosses in a little bit of the diversity that we needed as far as sonically. There is some more up-tempo tracks thrown throughout along with the ballads, and it comes up and down a little bit more, and it does it slightly better. You can tell that the boys just took everything from the debut, stepped everything up. They learned their lessons and were like, all right, this was great. We're going to make this one even better. I love the use of like the Luther Vandross sample and the writing on some of the sadder, Your Letter, Crazy Over You, incredible performance. Love You Like I Did. Oh, it's just anywhere for the freaks. Like, there's just so much to love in this album. There's a song here for everybody. In my opinion, it is the quintessential 112 album. Folks will argue over the debut in this one. I'm rocking with this one. I don't be wrong. I don't be wrong. And here we are at number 2 with the best R&B album of the Bad Boy era. We're talking Faith Evans' debut. This isn't just the best R&B record on the Bad Boy stable. This is one of the best R&B records. Should I say all time? Am I going to get in trouble if I say it's one of the best R&B records of all time? I'm going to say it's one of the best of all time because it's dope. I love it. Man, Faith was just, incredible. She was stepping into her own. I know that a lot of fans and artists were used to Puffy working with Mary J. Blige, and they were wondering how Faith would kind of do, and people were expecting this to be kind of an offshoot of My Life. It kind of isn't. Like, I can get where people would try to make that comparison. I don't think so. This one is even, My Life was just so heavy. It's great. I would say My Life is a better album than this album even, which is some high praise from me. But this album, whereas My Life was so, I don't want to say depressing, but it was just so heavy. This album has some heavy themes, but the themes of love and longing is stronger. Whereas My Life is like, man, these dudes kind of suck. This album is like, these dudes suck, but I'm looking for something better. Like, where the good dudes at? I feel that throughout the album. You can hear Faith going through previous relationships and looking for the one, looking for her guy. And this album really has that journey down pat. Some incredible writing, incredible performances. Soon as I get home, I'll knock this camera over if I hear it because it's so dope. And then don't even get to the album because Reasons? Y'all thought that Earth, Wind & Fire could only do a song called Reasons. Faith could do it too. An incredible release. One of my favorites ever. And when it comes to R&B, Bad Boy did not do it better. And yes, coming in at number 1, a pick some people might find controversial, but hey, get your own list. This is mine. We're talking about the notorious one himself, Life After Death. The double album of all double albums. In my opinion, the greatest double album in rap history. Let's set the tone. Double albums usually don't work because it's too much. There's too much going on. And whereas on first glance, you could maybe say that about this album actually makes every 20-something track work. It's a long story. It picks up from Biggie's suicide and his rebirth. The suicide from the previous album. This album represents the rebirth that comes here. And this album has him going through as he's finding happiness, almost. Of course, by the end of the album, he starts having those doubts again. And what makes it so sad is what we know what happens in real life is that just as he started to achieve fame and happiness, it was ripped away. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Man, like it always happens to the geniuses. But let's talk about this album itself. When we get to the 90s and the era of the super producer and every artist has 15 different producers on this album, in my eyes, that really started here. And the thing that has hurt that concept in recent years is that when you have all these different sounds, it's a contrast and the album isn't consistent and it doesn't flow. It flows here. Everything from what's beef and he addressing what beef really means to him drunkenly singing R&B songs. As goofy as it all sounds, it all comes together with some of the greatest lyrical performances in hip-hop history and some of the greatest songs in hip-hop history. And if you were to ever to doubt Biggie and think he was a one-trick pony, go listen to Notorious Thugs and listen to him flip his flow in the most creative way. My gosh, we lost this man too soon. Can you imagine what he would do on a trap beat? He could do anything. This album proved that Biggie could do anything. To me, an exquisite showcase of hip-hop at the finest level, from storytelling to technique, to lyricism, to production. One of the greatest albums of all time, and by far, Bad Boy's crowning achievement. And there you have it. The 20 best albums of Bad Boys Records run. Oh my gosh, this is a run that's still continuing, but I don't know how you're going to top these 20. But now it's your turn. You need to let me know what you think. What did you think of the list? Did you think Ready to Die should have been number 1? If you do, I really can't be mad at you. Are you mad that maybe your favorite from back in the day didn't make the list? Maybe this is your opportunity to talk about why it should have. And that's what we do. We allow opportunities here. I'll stop playing. Okay, I'll stop. I've been trolling y'all this whole video. So I'll let the joke go. I'll show love, give honorable mention to an album that should have been on the list and it just fell off. Put in Janelle Monae and knocked off some albums that I thought was going to make it. So let's show love to an album that should have been here. And that album is Cherry Dennis, In and Out of Love. Great R&B album that's very underrated. Deserves more love. I was sad when it got knocked to number 21. So shout out to Cherry Dennis. Wish I could have showed you some love, but I had to do it here. That's what we do. We show love to the good albums. This edition of the Soul and Stereo Sessions is a wrap. Play on, players.